Welcome to ARDEX Answers podcast, where you'll find the latest and greatest on flooring, tiling and waterproofing, as well as general construction for the Australian building industry.
Welcome back to ARDEX Answers. I'm Monique Fenech from ARDEX, and joining us today on the lounge is James Bradford. James is our Technical Services Advisor at ARDEX. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
Well, today's podcast topic is epoxy versus cement grout. Our first question to you, James, is what are the main differences between epoxy grout and sand and cement grout?
The main difference is there's quite a few to it. So epoxy grouts are usually resins and hardeners, and then you get like a colour pack with it. Cement grouts are basically sand and cement with coloured oxides and other bits and pieces put in. So the main difference, epoxies are chemically resistant, so they will resist any chemicals that you throw at them. That's why they're popular to be used in, you know, restaurants and commercial kitchens and hospitals and places that require that sort of thing. Cement grouts are just traditional sand and cement that obviously require a fair bit more maintenance than epoxy grouts, and also epoxy grouts don't allow water to pass through them, so they're quite a popular thing to have in wet areas and stuff like that, because it kind of adds an element of waterproofing to your system.
So James, in what situations would you recommend using epoxy grout over sand and cement grout?
Yeah, a lot of commercial jobs will go with epoxy grout over sand and cement base due to the chemical nature that you can clean them, you can throw stuff at them that cement based grout would eventually break down and have to be redone.
What are the key advantages of using sand and cement grout in tiling projects?
Epoxy grouts can be a lot more challenging to use. You generally, with sand and cement, you've got a lot more time to be able to use them. You've got a lot more tolerance with the amount you can grout before you start trying to clean it off. You can grout a lot more than you can with epoxy grouts. So with epoxy grouts, we always recommend that you only manage to do a couple of square metres at a time before you start the cleaning off process, because you can end up with what we call an epoxy haze on the tiles the next day, and that can become very, very problematic to remove due to them resisting chemicals. So no matter what you try and clean it with, it will just resist it and you won't be able to get it off. The one thing with epoxy grouts, a big thing is if you do end up in that situation, the only real thing that is going to get it off after the epoxy haze off after a 24-hour period is poly stripper or paint stripper.
Wow.
That's the only thing that's going to remove it after that time, because you can try and acid wash it, you can try and use white vinegar diluted in water, and it's not going to do anything.
So James, how about the maintenance required? Is it different for epoxy grouts versus sand and cement grouts?
Yeah, the epoxy grouts would be a lot easier to maintain because, as I said previously, they're chemically resistant, so you've really got to only do general upkeep with them. With sand and cement grouts, they can be a bit more challenging to keep clean because you've got to be careful what you're actually cleaning them with. If you're cleaning with harsh products and stuff like that, like bleach and this, you can end up bleaching the oxide out of it, so it will turn white on you, as in you're not going to have that with an epoxy grout. And you can seal sand and cement grout, so that will stop some of the moisture coming through and help you a little bit, but generally there's a lot more upkeep on sand and cement grout than there would be on epoxy.
And are there any training courses at ARDEX for grout?
We do an epoxy grouting course here. It's not run as regularly as some of our other courses, but we do run it once every few months as far as I'm aware.
I think look out for it, because it'd be good to understand how to clean it properly.
If you've never used epoxy grout before, it would be a big advantage to come and do the course prior to doing your own job at home or whatever, if you've never used epoxy grout before, because it will give you the tips and tricks you need to make sure that you do it successfully.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do it successfully and you end up with the haze that I spoke about, it can, if you're using paint stripper to remove it, you could damage your tiles and the grout itself, so you could end up in a lot of problems.
Well, James, thanks so much for sharing all that knowledgeable information about grouts today on our podcast. If you have a podcast question that you'd like us to answer, please go to our form on our podcast channel and fill it in. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks, James.
No problem, thank you.
And bye for now.